This slideshow will give you an idea of the geography of the Western Trails from about 1840 to about 1880. The picture in the background of the first slide is of South Pass in central Wyoming. This was the area where the Oregon-California Trail crossed the Continental Divide. Early travelers heading to Oregon or California dreaded crossing the Rocky Mountains, or as they sometimes called them, the Shining Mountains, because of the difficulty they envisioned getting their wagons across the high peaks. However, when they reached the Continental Divide crossing at South Pass, as you can see, they found very broad, seemingly level high plains that presented no problem at all to get to the western slope. What a relief that was! Now let's look a little closer at Western geography in Slide 2. As you can see from this slide, the Western Trails went through a great variety of countryside: central plains, high plains, foothills, mountains, narrow valleys, and crossed hundreds of creeks and streams, plus many large rivers. Even with advanced information, as most travelers had after about 1845, it was difficult to envision the new landscape they were going to encounter ahead as they progressed. Since wagon travel was slow, averaging about 15 to 20 miles per day, but sometimes much less than that, pioneers got bored very quickly with seeing similar countryside day after day after day, and often failed to notice subtle changes such as elevation. One thing they did notice, however, was less and less rainfall as they progressed westward. Let's look at Slide 3. This map defines rainfall amounts across the western U.S. The bright red and dark red areas receive less than 10 inches of rain, geographically classifying them as desert. The greenest areas in the west are on the west sides of mountain ranges, where high peaks cause clouds to dispense rain before rising to cross the mountain crest, thus creating sporadic green belts across the west. I have roughly drawn the Oregon Trail across this map so you can see that the trail generally kept to the drier areas of the map, making for easier terrain, but also the trial of finding daily water. Another thing you can see from this map is why the overlanders did not stop on the Great Plains, but pressed on to Oregon Territory and the lush, fertile valleys within 100 miles of the west coast. The Great Plains is much drier than the area just west of the Mississippi River, Arkansas, Missouri, and Iowa, and was known to trail travelers as the Great American Desert. It would not be settled until the 1870s, and not successfully farmed until the introduction of hard red wheat from Russia in the late 1880s. Now change to Slide 4. Slide 4 gives you an overview of the international flavor of the West during the Overland Trail's years. Louisiana Territory was purchased from France in 1803 and added to the U.S. land base, from which the state of Missouri was carved in 1820. The Louisiana Territory remained unorganized, meaning it was part of the United States but had no state or local governments. Except for Fort Laramie in today's southeast Wyoming, there was little federal presence west of today's central Nebraska, and by 1845, only a few American settlers resided in Oregon. So travelers before 1850 were literally on their own for the majority of the trip. In 1847, the Mormons established Salt Lake City. In 1848, the land below today's Oregon-Idaho southern border was acquired by the U.S. in the Mexican War, and gold was discovered in California. So by 1850, the road to Oregon and California was a relatively busy trail. Go on to Slide. This 1852 map of the western United States helps us see the political landscape as Western travelers of the day thought of it. Go on to Slide 6. On Slide 6, you can see the major rivers of the western U.S., which were the highways of the first half of the 19th century. The Oregon-California Trail roughly followed the Missouri River across Missouri, through the corner of Kansas, and crossed over to the Platte in central Nebraska. Then it followed the North Platte through today's Nebraska Panhandle and on to central Wyoming where Casper is today. From there it followed the Sweetwater, where those going on to Oregon jumped over to the Snake and followed it to the Columbia, then south down into the Willamette Valley. Those going to California left the Sweetwater and crossed a relatively dry space into the Salt Lake Valley, then another dry patch to the Humboldt, and followed it until it sinks into the desert just east of the Sierra Nevada mountains. Travelers had a rough road up the east side of that mountain range, then followed the American River down into the Sacramento Valley in today's Northern California. Go on to Slide 7. Slide 7 shows an overview of the many trails in the West, a few of which we will learn about in this course as we continue to read about frontier women.